So the creative task is a funny old task in VCE English because it is not examinable. It's not something that you're going to have to do again once you've completed the SAC in term 1 or term 2 of your year 12 year. However, it still is worth 30 marks and there is plenty that you can get from doing it well that's going to set you up to do well with the other tasks later in the year. Today, we're going to dispel a few myths about this task. We're going to take a look at what it is, how you'll be assessed on it, how you can do well on it, some ideas for the way that you might want to go about it. But we're also going to dispel some myths about what it isn't and taking a look at some of the things that you might be stressing about at the moment that really you don't need to be worrying about whatsoever. As always, with any of our English Lab videos, you can ask your more specific questions in the comments down below. You can also ask about the texts that you're working on, specific questions about those, perhaps even float a few ideas around, or you can ask for clarification about anything that I've covered today in the video that you'd just like a little more information on. So firstly, we're going to take a look at what the task is and trying to break it down to its core elements. And first of all, this task is an opportunity for you to show the depth of knowledge that you have about the text that you are writing on. Showing your depth of knowledge when it comes to the creator and their ideas, what they were trying to get across, the values that they were explicitly putting across in the text, some of the ideas that they were implying through the things that happened in their text, and taking a look at that and being able to show that off in a creative manner. This task is also a place for you to be able to show off your understanding of how your text has been put together. The construction of the text, whether it's a film or a play or a novel or short stories, whatever it might be, this is also a place for you to be able to creatively write in a similar manner so that you can show that you understand how the writer has created meaning through the way in which they have created the world of their text. And once we're in that world and once we're talking about the manner in which it's been created, that's when we can really dive in and start to explore similar ideas and to do it in a similar way to the author so that we can make sure that we're showing a true knowledge that we understood exactly what this text was all about. One thing that's really worth remembering with this task is that it falls under the same area of study as the analytical task. And so the knowledge and the skills that you gain through looking at this text are going to help you out in the way that you look analytically at texts as well. So don't forget that these two tasks, while they are very different in the product that we put forward, one being very creative and one being more cold and analytical, the knowledge and the understanding that we have to get there is very similar. It's the same in that it is about values, ideas, construction of text, characterization, language, setting, all of those things that we need to have a deep knowledge of when it comes to understanding a text. The only difference comes in how we show that in a creative manner. And so while we're discussing this, it's really worthwhile taking a look at what this task isn't and dispelling the first myth that I get asked a heck of a lot by a bunch of different students. And that is, how do I write exactly like the author? You do not have to write exactly like the author. This is not a task that is a challenge to write like the author did. You are not being expected as a 17 or 18-year-old in year 12 to be able to write to the quality of a published author. Rather, you are expected to be able to write with your own sense of style that emulates the ideas of an author, that emulates the way in which an author has conveyed meaning, that shows knowledge. Now, in saying this, of course, the pieces that are more fluent and more expressive and, in generally just better written are going to perform better. We'll see that later on with the rubric. But so many students get so caught up thinking that this is an exercise in mimicry, meaning that I don't know how exactly I'm going to write like Tony Jordan or Kate Kennedy or all these other fantastic authors, when that's not what's being assessed. Further to that, this is not just a task that suits the good writers, these people that are just naturally blessed as being really expressive and can always write really creatively. In fact, sometimes students can get carried away with this task and get too carried away with the idea of just writing some fantastic creative story that they go far beyond what the actual objective of the task is. So you need to make sure that whilst you are being creative and you're being very fluent and expressive in your writing, that you're actually meeting the outcomes as well. And that is to show an understanding of how meaning has been created and the ideas of the text that you understand, and how you can show an understanding of the way in which the author or the creator of your text has got those ideas across. And so a couple of ideas for what it can look like. And by no means is this going to be an exhaustive list of what you must do when it comes to this, but rather it might be some inspiration as to what you can do. Just remember that you are not expected to write a lengthy, viable chapter that would fit in easily within the text. That can be a good idea if you want to do that, but that is not the only way to go about doing this. You might decide to write a missing moment. And this is a very, very popular way of going about this task, and I can see why. It's because you can take that knowledge of the text and you can choose that moment and you can write in a similar way to the author. A lot of the work will have already been done for you as well, because you're writing this for someone who understands the text. And so if you explain to that person that you are sliding this moment in between point A and point B in the original source material, well, then the creation of the world has been done for you, and you are there just to merely keep going with that and to run with it and to show that you can write in a way that still does those things in a similar manner. By doing this as well, you can work with established characters, and rather than having to create a character out of thin air, you can work with an already known character and show your depth of knowledge about them based on what they think, what they say, what happens to them, how they react to these things. And by putting original thoughts onto those sorts of ideas and putting your character in new situations or examining what they'd be thinking at a certain moment is a great way of you being able to show your depth of knowledge as to that character and what they represent in terms of the ideas that are being conveyed in your text. In saying that though, you might not want to choose a moment that fits in perfectly with the text. You might want to go to an area of the text that hasn't been examined because that's something that fascinates you. You might choose to take a known character but put them in an unfamiliar situation, or put them in another place and setting that actually allows you to explore them in a different way. Of course, this might have its advantages because it allows you to be really original whilst using new and fresh symbols and ideas and structural elements and so on in order to show off your knowledge of the text without running the risk of just merely repeating what the author has already said and just writing something that's unoriginal and not showing any depth of thought. The one key thing to remember here as well is that you are allowed to write outside of the world of the text. However, personally, in my experience, I've seen it go wrong far more times than I've seen it go right. So please take that in the way that it's intended. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that with the limited time that you have to write, if you are going to go outside of the world of the text and write about characters and people that we don't know about as the people reading reading your piece, then you're going to have to spend a lot of time creating those things, and you're going to have to draw a lot of links that aren't just going to be implied by working within the text. So a really clear message with that. It is allowed, but I'd want to make sure if I was doing that, that I really had everything perfectly organized to make sure that I'd be able to nail all the points that I want to. So how do we do well with this task? What is it that we can be doing to get the best out of ourselves? I'm going to provide you with a few tips and a few ideas that I think will really help you get the most out of yourself when it comes to writing creatively, now that we've already covered all of the things that we want to make sure that we're focusing on. And first of all, you need to be drafting. It's there in the study design. One of the things that they want you to be working on here is the ability to draft and redraft a piece of work. And it's important because that's where you're going to get your improvement from. You need to experiment with ideas. You need to allow yourself to start writing something creatively in the drafting process without being 100% sure of where it's going to go. Last year, I was lucky enough to interview Kate Kennedy, and she even spoke about the fact that some of the great ideas and the literary devices and the structural elements that she used in her stories came to her by accident on a first draft. And so if that's happening with one of the authors that we are studying, that can definitely be happening with you as well, in that you might find yourself including some little element or symbol that just came to you off the top of your head as you were writing freely that actually ended up having a lot more meaning when you actually took the time to apply it to what you were saying. So start writing early, start experimenting with a whole range of different ideas and find the one that works for you the best. Find something that's going to help you be able to write quickly, to be able to write a lot, and to be able to make sure that you are showing an understanding of the ideas and the structure of your chosen text. So you've written a few drafts. What can you do with it then? My advice would be to print off or to take the handwritten copy of the final draft, the last draft that you've written, and to pull out a highlighter. And I want you to highlight every time in your creative piece where you have made a deliberate choice that has allowed you to show your knowledge of the source text. Something that has shown your knowledge of its characters, of its ideas, of the setting of similar literary devices that have been used, of the structure that it's used, of the language that's used, anything that you have done that has allowed you in a creative way to be able to show your interpretation of the original text. And what you should be seeing there is plenty of highlighter on the page. Every sentence should be showing off knowledge of the original text or getting to a deeper new understanding of that text, or at least moving towards it. If you find yourself reading your draft and you are reading through sentence after sentence after sentence after section, and there's nothing there that really has a deliberate sense of showing off a knowledge of the source text, then you really need to be contemplating whether that needs to be included in your piece at all. You don't have a long time to write this piece when it comes to the SAC, so make sure that your piece is getting to the point and showing a lot of these ideas in the way in which it's deliberately moving towards interpretation the whole time. And so if we've done that, we can then start to evaluate not just if we are doing the task by looking at how much we've been able to highlight, but the level to which we are having success with this task. And what I want you to do here is to take a look at the choices that you've made and think about how you are going to write them in your statement of intention or statement of explanation. What is it that you're going to be able to say about these choices that's going to show that real deep knowledge of the text and its implications and what it's all about? A really common trap at this point that students fall into is where they fall into just mimicking what the original text did. So if you find yourself explaining the choices that you've made and you're saying something along the lines of, I included an inner monologue of my character talking about their feelings to a relative that they have because that's something that Kate Kennedy does. Or perhaps you've written something like, I referred to the piece being in the twilight because that's something that Joan London does a lot throughout her novel In the Golden Age. Well, then you are at the very base level of showing that you understand something that the author has done. But if you can't go any further than that, then you are really stuck at the bottom of that ladder. You are not moving beyond merely pointing out that you know that the author does something. The next step with that has to be including things in your creative piece that do the same things as the writer for a reason, and being able to explain why you've made those choices, the impact of those choices, and what it allowed you to show in further depth and detail that showed a deeper knowledge of the author and their intentions. So instead of just pointing out that you've copied a time of day in the same way that the author might have, you might set out your piece by explaining something along the lines of, I chose to set my piece in the twilight of the day in an effort to reflect the loss of hope that is being experienced by the characters, whilst also bringing up the ideas that their relationship is coming to an end. Now, that might be a slightly better description, but we can still go further in order to really make sure that we're showing our teacher and our assessors that we fully understand why we've made the choices we've made and that they're reflective of that original material. And that might look like this. For students of the Golden Age, this will sound more familiar to you, but it'll be helpful for everyone. The next sentence in your statement of explanation could read something like, this was done in an effort to emulate how London often uses light as a symbol of hope and of optimism, and how she uses the absence of light as the opposite of those things and as a symbol of despair and loss of hope. And so if you were writing in that way, and if you were explaining your choices in that way, you are showing that you've understood a really common and simple structural element that an author has used, i.e. the time of day or light being a symbol of hope, but that you've done it in a way that is a little bit different because you've talked about twilight and how that represents the day or an experience coming to an end. It's a way of you being original whilst being inspired by what the original text had to say. And therefore you are being creative, you are being analytical in the way as well, that you are not just writing a really nice creative piece, but you are showing that it has been inspired by the ideas and that it uses similar symbols and ideas to the world of the text from which you've been studying. So ask yourself the following when it comes to your completed draft piece. What is it that my author does? What is it that the author of my piece says? And have I shown an understanding of all of those things in my creative piece? Ask yourself further questions. What are the ideas, the big ideas and values that are implied in my text? How does structure, characterization, setting, and language help the author achieve those sorts of ideas and convey those ideas? And have I shown similar things and similar elements in my own writing? And can I explain them in my statement? If the answer to all of these is yes, and you've got the highlighter out and you're excited about all the choices that you've made, well, then you're definitely on the right track. But if you're getting to the writing of your statement of intention or statement of explanation and you're finding yourself a little bit lost as to what to explain, it could be a really good sign that perhaps you're not including enough material that is reflective of the original text. Finally, with all of this, you should then be able to get your highlighter out and highlight all of the choices that you've made in your statement of intention. Don't forget that that statement is a really key part of it. It is not a have-to task. It's not something that, oh, the teacher said we have to do this. It's a really important part of the assessment. If you can write it confidently and write in a way where you are constantly coming back to, I then included this. I chose to set my piece at this certain time. I had my character do this. I wanted to reflect the character's tendency to be indecisive by the manner in which I had them, whatever it might be. If you can put all of those things in your statement, then you can be confident that your piece that you are reflecting on is saying a lot and showing that depth of knowledge. So be really mature about your statement. Don't look at it as something that's an addition to the task and something that you have to do to just throw in at the end. See it as an opportunity for you to check off the fact that you have shown a really great link to the original text through all of the choices that you've made, and that you've made so many choices and been so deliberate in what you've done in your creative piece that you just can't wait to write everything down in your statement. Finally, keeping yourself on track. And I'm going to show you on the screen in a moment the official rubric that is given out by the VCAA. And you can access this. This is not a secret, secret teacher's business or anything like that. I'll provide a link to it in the description. But if you take a look through that rubric, you'll get an understanding as to what is being assessed, these 4 key things. And as you look through them, you'll notice that all of them link back to all of the advice that I've been giving you today. Run your eyes down through the medium and the high and the very high sections and ask yourself to what level you are meeting these skills. Have you chosen original key moments and characters and themes and ideas that are worthy of expression? Have you developed a voice and style, and have you adapted language and literary devices? That word adapted is a really key one. Have you been able to take the things that you know from your text and do them in your own original way in the creative piece in a way that shows that knowledge? Have you been generally fluent and coherent? Again, that comes down to your ability to draft and to rehearse these things to make sure that you're being as expressive as possible. And then finally, all of those notes there about the justification of your choices and the fact that a really good statement of intention should have a justification of all of the range of choices that you've made. The great thing about this rubric is that chances are your school will be using it. If they're not using it, they'll be using something very similar. As a student, you are well within your rights to ask your teacher to have a look at that rubric beforehand to make sure that you are aware of exactly what you are going to be assessed on. But I'll guarantee you that it must be something that is going to be very similar to this, if not this document itself. And so if you can show that maturity to be able to take this as a way of keeping yourself on track and to evaluate how you're doing, and then to challenge yourself to look into the high and the very high columns and to think about the depth to which you need to write about these ideas and these choices that you've made, it can be a really great recipe for success. So guys, that is everything for the creative task. I hope that you have got a lot out of this video. If you have, please check out our other videos. We have a whole range of content ranging from argument analysis to the comparative pairs to exam preparation, and also all of the other Section A texts that are there. We're always looking for suggestions as to how to improve the channel, so please put them down there in the comments. Subscribe to the channel because we're going to be adding videos just about every week throughout 2021 to really improve the channel and to really help you guys out with your VCE journey. But until we see you next time, all the best for your studies and good luck.